So 9 out of 10 students I was coaching this week were really struggling to hit their irons and the fairway woods off the deck. So frustrating, they were hitting the ground behind the golf ball, someone even hitting the ball at all, they would top it along the ground, and others were lacking accuracy and distance by hitting some big slices or hooks. So frustrating, isn't it, when you hit a great drive and you end up ruining it off the fairway. Now, we managed to secure every single one of them in very, very different ways, and I thought it'd be really helpful for you today for me to give you 5 simple ways that you can go about improving the quality of your contact and your accuracy with every club off the fairway. Now, before I get into the video, look, if you're new to the channel, it's one of your first lessons of mine, please consider subscribing. Or at least videos just like this one every single week to try and help you improve your game. Plus, you'll never have to remember a thing. I'll always put a free download or practice guide in the description box below. So tip number 1, and I gave this to Todd. Todd was really struggling with his contact. It often topped the ball just along the ground. Now, all I gave with him was this really simple visual. I said, Todd, ultimately, I want you to imagine now a clock face on the ground. Now look at this here. Your lead arm and club here are at 12 o'clock. And notice this, they're ahead of the golf ball, okay? This is super important. I said, I want you to hit that golf ball not at 12. Right now, you're not even gonna hit 12, you're almost hitting it at like 11 o'clock here. I want you to hit that golf ball at 1, but for you, it might even feel like you're hitting it at 2 o'clock here, right? So I said, what do you think you need to do to achieve that? So he says, well, okay, so does my ball position need to be further back? Yes. So the stage number 1, I got him to move his ball position back in his stance. Stage number 2, I got him to put his handle forward, right? So what we've done is we've moved his ball position from too far forward here to more central. In fact, I gave him a little routine of putting his feet together and taking even steps so he could get his ball position right every time. Then all I did was make sure his hands were opposite his inside left thigh. So now we'd set almost like what he felt was this 2 o'clock position. From then, all we did was get him to visualize the clock face. And I said, look, Tom, from here, you've got to hit it at 2. You've been hitting it almost at 11, right? So I said, just now hit some shots from that new setup position with ball position and hand position and start to hit it at 2 o'clock, not 12 o'clock. But it didn't work. Which brought us on to tip number 2. So what had Todd done there? Well, basically, we'd preset him. He should have struck it well, shouldn't he? We preset impact at 2 o'clock. But what had he done? Because he was so used to hitting it at 12, his body returned back to what he felt comfortable, which is almost this lifting position, right? Lifting up. I needed him to work on striking more down, or get a feel or a visual of striking down. So this moves us on to tip number 2. We've got him now preset to impact, okay? Now I need him to kind of maintain that 2 o'clock strike. And to do that, I got him to visualize this. I got him right now, I said, look, Todd, there's a soul to your golf club here, right? Now, when you're striking that ball, the part that's actually striking the ground is the back part of this golf club. That's what you're doing. You're adding loft to the golf club and you're hitting the back part. I want you to get the leading edge, the front part here, striking the ground first. I want you to imagine that. So I got him to do a few exercises before he actually hit the next shot. I got him to get himself set up at 2 o'clock, but then what I did, I said, look, I want you to imagine now that leading edge, look, cutting into the ground. And straight away, what started to happen? His weight started to go where? Forward, because the only way you can get that leading edge making a mark look in this turf is if you get where? Your weight forward. Every time he went backwards, he would just bruise the ground with the back part and the blunt part of his golf club. This was a game changer. So now we'd set him up now with his hands forward, okay, body in position. All I got him to do now was fire that leading edge. Imagine that he's digging into the ground, okay, as he strikes this golf ball here. Made a few small shots. And that there gives that beautiful compression. So those 2 tips were enough for Todd. Let's work on now tip number 3. So tip number 3, and this involved Lewis. Now, Lewis actually had a pretty good setup position, okay? Everything was okay. The problem is he was missing one ingredient, which is club face. Club face is king in golf. So when he was swinging the club back, he didn't have as much flexibility as some of the other guys. And one of the things he was trying to do is complete his swing. Now, the problem is in doing that, a lot of people feel like you've got to get the club all the way to parallel. But you know what? You might not be able to do that, right? Now the problem is what he was doing is excessively then, he was trying to cock his wrist to try and get the club completing. And all this does is gets what's called extension in this lead wrist here. And that opens the face wide open. And what I mean by an open face is the face becomes like this. The more those wrists start to cock like this, the more that face opens. Now the problem is that when your face opens, you're going to have to close it, right? Otherwise you slice it. Now what he was doing subconsciously to close it was he'd be starting to do this. That gives that kind of flicky, horrible strike. It wasn't a 2 o'clock solid strike like this, it was a flicky strike. So the simplest change we made to Lewis's game was to make sure I give him a feel of this. As opposed to, in a sense, opening, I actually got him here, look, just to get a sensation, look, of there's wrists almost here, look, just doing this, just close the face from 12 to 10 or 11, right? Just get the sensation. And on the way back, I made sure that he was doing it somewhere on the way back. He just felt like the face was a little bit more closed because you've only got a quarter of a second to complete the downswing. So if the face is closed and he's ready to go, it's so much easier just to then turn beautifully onto that golf ball. If the face is wide open and I turned onto that golf ball, I'm going to shank it, slice it, you name it. Whereas if the face is there, we can now simply turn on and keep that beautiful compression and that 2 o'clock strike. That's all we did with Lewis. So I got himself set up, I got him to rehearse a couple of motions where on the way back, he felt like that club face, so his knuckles were turning down a little bit here, and then from there, played almost a few little chip shots down the fairway. And that creates this beautiful draw shape for me, but for Lewis, because he was actually kind of slicing the ball initially, this kind of just beautifully straightened up his slice. So tip number 4 involved Richard. Now Richard was struggling with not just his contact, but his direction too. And his number one issue, which I see so often, so just be careful of this, okay, is when he takes the club back, the arms start to pull the club inside. The club gets very, very narrow. And if you look from behind here, my right elbow is starting to get tucked way behind me. When you start getting very narrow, again, often in an attempt to make a full swing, the problem is when you get narrow here, you're going to have to do what? You're going to have to throw the club out. As you throw the club out, it releases, and now it releases early, and you end up in this kind of flicky position here. I see this all the time, particularly it's like the older gentlemen as well, because you struggle with sometimes the flexibility to complete, and then you cheat by bringing this around. It's so important to keep the space, keep this right arm here, this trail arm, away from you here, because if it's away from you, you've got width. We can move it back towards, look, and create that 2 o'clock strike we talked about earlier. But if it starts to throw inside, you then have to throw the club out, and as the momentum goes this way, the club gets thrown and ends up like this, okay? Nowhere near the strike that you need. So what we did with Rich is basically get him to focus on this trail elbow and just this right trail arm here, working out and creating width. Now, I needed him to feel like he was probably only swinging to about here, because in reality, even when I got him to swing to here, he still swung back there. So I want you to visualize this. I want you to visualize a very wide swing here, stays out there, so the hands are out there, so that you can now move, look, to that 2 o'clock place. Wide, and then take your trail arm, look, and move it to 2 o'clock. There to 2. My right arm gets in here, I'm really gonna struggle. I can't get it to 2, I'm gonna have to come out and around the corner, okay? So just visualize nice circles. I'm gonna do a small swing just to here, then move it to 2 o'clock, okay? Nice and simple. There we go. Let's play it down the fairway just like that, okay? So move it out, move it to 2 o'clock. So tip number 5 involved the fairway woods, and do you know what? Every single one of them struggled with the fairway woods off the deck, and the reason being very, very simple was this. They assumed they needed to treat it like a driver, when actually fairway woods, hybrids, should be treated just like irons. So just like the clock face, the only difference here is this. As opposed to maybe striking it at 2 o'clock with the irons, I want you to strike it at maybe 1 o'clock. So what changes do you make in order to achieve that? You move the ball position a little bit closer towards your front foot, but not to the point where it would be with driver, which is 12 o'clock. You just want it around, let's say 1 o'clock, 3 inches inside that lead heel here. The hands are still ahead here, and you still want the same principles, okay? We're still having a slightly descending blow look on this golf ball to strike your fairway woods. Just keep that in mind, okay? If the ball's going along the ground and you're topping it, it's almost certainly nothing to do with the fact that you are coming down on the golf ball. It's mostly because you're probably hitting up on the ball here and you're hitting the top of that golf ball, all right? Or you're doing all the things we talked about in the first 4 steps. So treat your fairway woods exactly like irons, just with a slightly further forward ball position here, hands forward, with the same intention to hit down on this golf shot. And you can start ripping fairways just like that. So, hope you enjoyed these 5 simple tips. If you know somebody struggling with their ball striking off the fairway with their woods as well as their irons, please go and share it. And of course, look, if you enjoyed videos like this one and you'd like to see a video specifically just on woods and hybrids alone, please check this one out right here. And of course, look, if you're new to the site, press that subscribe button right here. But until next week, have a wonderful golfing week.